Velkommen til Trondheim. Her har vi faktisk fint vær. Mitt navn Jon Kroksti, og jeg har hatt gleden av å lede programkomiteen for Nokios 2011, den 5. Nokios i rekken. Rektor ved NTNU, Torbjørn Dignes, vil straks åpne årets konferanse offisielt, før Valeria Neira Lillebjerka og Julie Rokseth skal introdusere oss for bandoneon. Men først Torbjørn Dignes.
Takk skal du ha, Jon. Velkommen til Nokios 2011. Vi ved NTNU har hatt en strategiprosess som vi nylig har avsluttet, og en del av det som står i vår visjon, der står det at vi skal utnytte vår teknisk-naturvitenskapelige hovedprofil, vår faglige bredde og tverrfaglige kompetanse til å møte de store sammensatte utfordringene som Norge og verdenssamfunnet står overfor. Store ord, men jeg tror det riktig og viktig av oss at vi løfter opp det som vi gjerne kort kaller samfunnsoppdraget. Dette universitetet har tradisjon for å arbeide tett sammen med samfunns- og næringsliv, og vi har absolutt planer om å gjøre det videre. Og hvordan vi omformer og effektiviserer offentlig sektor i lys av de utfordringene som den står overfor, det da et godt eksempel på et område av denne typen. IKT-endringer et viktig element som driver endringsprosesser i alle deler av samfunnet, ikke minst i offentlig sektor. Så det avgjørende for oss å kunne forholde oss til dette for å bidra til å bygge fremtidens samfunn. Vi har bruk for smidigere og raskere prosesser i tjenestene fra offentlige virksomheter, og ikke minst har vi bruk for effektivisering og produktivitetsøkning, slik at vi kan utføre disse tjenestene med mindre personellinnsats. For å få til resultat på tvers av tradisjonelle faglige skillelinjer og organisatoriske skillelinjer, så jobber jo mange fagfolk fra ulike deler, fra statsvitenskap, jus, data, teknikk, organisasjonskunnskap, økonomi og mange andre fagområder. Og det viktig at de snakker sammen, og et tiltak for å skape møteplasser for dette tverrfaglige arbeidet, det da Nokios norsk konferanse for IKT i offentlig sektor. Det ble tatt initiativ til dette fra program for IKT i offentlig sektor ved NTNU i 2007, og vi arrangerer årets konferanse sammen med DIFI, som altså Direktoratet for forvaltning og IKT, og der som dere ser, en rekke samarbeidspartnere fra privat og offentlig sektor som har vært med på å lage programmet til denne konferansen. Nokios 2011 5. konferanse i rekken, og dette har utviklet seg gradvis. Og et særlig spørsmål nå har vi nødvendig kompetanse i de deler av samfunnet som trengs for å utnytte IKT-infrastrukturen på en god måte. Vi klar til å ta ut gevinstene av bruken av denne teknologien? Hvordan skal vi få til det? Program for IKT i offentlig sektor en del av det vi kaller et tematisk satsingsområde på IKT. Vi har 6 sånne områder på NTNU, og vi har 6 sånne områder her, og de skal bygge bro mellom fakultetene våre og mobilisere våre fagfolk på tvers til å jobbe sammen med eksterne samarbeidspartnere om deres problem, og ikke på premissene til enkeltdisipliner ved NTNU. Vi ved NTNU har jo tradisjonelt vært industrielt orientert. Vi har helt fra den spede begynnelse for 101 år siden nå arbeidet sammen med næringslivet. Mens vi kanskje har mindre oppmerksomhet mot offentlig sektor. Årsakene til det sikkert flere, og det nok å finne både i vår egen organisasjon og innenfor sektoren. Men det da desto mer gledelig å se at det nå utvikler seg i en retning som gjør at samarbeidet med offentlig sektor utvikler seg i betydelig grad. E-forvaltning har blitt et fagfelt og en arena der både norske og internasjonale fagmiljø fra akademia og fra praksisfeltet jobber tettere og tettere sammen. Så jeg håper at vi kommer til å se betydelige resultat også fra denne konferansen. Jeg ser frem til å følge dette arbeidet videre. Lykke til med konferansen, med diskusjoner og starten på nye samarbeid som kan sørge for en god balanse mellom samordning og fleksibilitet i de løsninger som det offentlige tilbyr sine borgere og til næringslivet. Velkommen til Nokios 2011.
Hei, det var da Milonga de Mis Amores. Julie skal da fortsette med en kort solo, og vi avslutter med Oblivion sammen.
For the opening keynote, we have been so fortunate to have Robert Madeleine, Director General of Information Society and Media at the European Commission in Brussels. Robert has served in the Commission since 1993 as Director General for Health and Consumer Policies from 2004 to 2010, as Director in DG Trade and in the Cabinet of Sir Leon, now Lord Britton, European Commission Vice President. The title of his talk is The EU Digital Agenda and European Government Modernization. Robert.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let me say firstly that it's a real honor for me to have been invited to speak to this conference. I come not as a technologist, I'm a historian by training, so the bit I can relate to is public service, that's my career, and I come with some trepidation to speak to the Nokios because some of the journalists were saying to me, so what's the lesson we should learn from you? And I don't think that's the spirit in which I could possibly come. Norway is one of the 30 countries of the European Economic Area, and I think that all the countries in that area and beyond, in the area of ICT and public service, we are working together. So it's really to just share experience and offer a few thoughts, which I hope will feed into the work that you will be discussing over these couple of days. And I know that what comes out of a conference like this, as well as the work that you are doing together, will help us, both the European Commission in Brussels and the networks within which we operate, to do a better job. So it's all about people, and this has not been, I think, a glorious time for our societies. You have the pictures that will be familiar to you on the top, and those which may be familiar from London and Birmingham and Bristol on the bottom. The nature of turmoil in our societies varies, but I think that as public servants we would surely feel that we need to be part of the solution to and the healing of the problems that underlie such images. And although, therefore, ICT is a technical and public service is a boring subject for most of our fellow citizens, my belief is that the agenda that we are looking at, whether it's at the European, at the global level, in our towns and villages, or in Norway specifically, that agenda is relevant to what we have to do. One of the difficulties is that we all now have digital strategies. There's the digital agenda for Europe, which the European Commission has proposed. There are all sorts of other agenda. I know, at least I was told yesterday, that the government here is thinking about having a digital agenda in Norway. So what does that mean? And how can we learn from each other in such a way that we are moving from nice ideas, good agenda, interesting pilots and research projects to actually making the world a better place? It is important. This is the sort of image with which we have tried to explain in the digital agenda for Europe the interaction of the different obstacles and speed bumps, as somebody was calling them in one of the conversations yesterday in Oslo. Obstacles and speed bumps which get in the way of giving a better service to our citizens and which slow down our progress. If we could get from the obstacles in the middle there to the outer edge of this washing machine, as some people call it, we would be able to unleash increased demand for our citizens for the services we can offer. And I think in the field of digital public goods, that's just as important as in the area of video on demand and gaming. That will drive and help the rollout of networks. And we believe, therefore, that the borderless nature of the internet can drive a borderless delivery of services. And borderless can mean between local counties as well as between sovereign states and between continents. Can we do that today? So I talked about the social turmoil that some countries have experienced recently. We also have that problem called the euro, and if you're not in the eurozone, of course, you have the other problem, which is that your currency is very strong. And even if the currency problem is not a problem, the global economy is not in a double-dip recession, but not in great shape. So what is the relevance of our agenda to that? I believe that the answer has been given many times, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that it's particularly the case when times are hard, and it's particularly the case for public sector leadership that we should look sufficiently far into the future. It's very clear, and for the G8 meeting in Deauville, McKinsey did a new report which gave these figures. It's very clear that while the sector called ICT in our national and European economies is relatively small, the hidden effects of that sector once the ICT are deployed is huge. So the key thing, I think, is that the impact of internet on traditional industries is 75% of their growth, and that productivity growth is even higher than GDP growth in mature economies if you look at the part of it which is being driven by ICT deployment. You have not just the acquisition of kit and software, you have also the needs for organizational change, but then the real productivity gains that come from that. And somewhere in between, we have an increasing, I think, market in intangibles which our economists can't measure, but which our citizens know when they get hold of them. So now is not a time to say, we'll get back to this after the crisis. This is the answer to the crisis. And coming closer to my core business, ex-Vice President Monti did a report for the current Barroso II Commission and very firmly put his emphasis on the need to finish the digital single market. The European Council, so the Prime Ministers in the summer, took time out from addressing the Euro challenge to ask us to do a new report on accelerating progress towards the digital single market. Some of that is relevant only for the for-profit sector, but a lot of it is relevant for ICT in public service too. I don't want to give a long speech about the digital agenda being in 100 different actions, in 7 pillars, and with legislative proposals. But here are just a few of the examples of what we're pushing at. So it's not only creating a single market, it's using ICT to help society. That's getting closer to our core business today, and I'll come back to e-government. But underlying our ability to do that, we need broadband everywhere. We need to include everybody in access to the services. And we do have to have, I would say, foundation conditions, interoperability, strong standards, trust and security. And we do need continued research on some aspects of that, not just on the techie stuff, but also on the deployment and use and the societal impact, what it does to people when ICT gets into society. So that's the agenda. And if I can emphasize a few things where we are working today, I think that on all of these issues and more, my impression, having talked to many of the actors in different meetings, not only yesterday in Oslo, but in the places where the Norwegian actors are pushing around the agenda elsewhere in Europe, I think these are issues which are on everybody's agenda. And our question, I guess yours for the remainder of this conference, is how can we make the public sector delivery part of fixing some of these problems which the for-profit sector and government administrations at the national level are not fixing as fast as they would like to. Other examples I would like to just mention so that we come back to them: health data, skills and training and research. Yesterday I was talking at the University of Oslo, and I was talking just now to the rector. I think that there's a huge agenda about getting our society ready for the future here. So skills, not just how to use Facebook, but real ICT skills from the classroom upwards, and the interactivity between ICT and other disciplines at university level and in our research programs. In the autumn, those of you who are interested in the EU research strategy will see our proposals for so-called Horizon 2020, the next 10-year plan for research. And we hope that there will be support from different countries and from the Council and from the European Parliament for more money for ICT and a focus on societal challenges. That opens the door, I think, for the ICT public service agenda to get more profile in the research world going forward. So the last thing I would say about the agenda itself, and then I come to e-government and a few final words on Norway, is that we're not sure we do this bit well, but we do aspire to running our policy process in an open and inclusive way. And when I say our policy process, that means, of course, everybody can have it. We're quite proud of the digital market scoreboard, which we put up on our website this summer. So if you haven't looked at it, please look at it. It's an example of open data. We would encourage researchers and practitioners to give us feedback so that we can build it better. If you weren't at the Digital Agenda Assembly in Brussels this year, there'll be another next year, which is an opportunity to bring all people who think that the digital changes are important to them into the same conversation. And you will see that we want to coordinate with everybody, and you will see that everybody is more than 27. So feel free to get online and to come and join in this process. I know that many of you are already aware of what's going on, but I think that there's room for us to learn from each other more than we do. So, what do we do on e-government? I think that we have started e-government in Europe as a whole with a big push from the Nordic countries. Under the Swedish presidency, the Malmö meeting of ministers set an agenda, and these essentially are the challenges that we are focusing on. I think that the initial action plan has now been reinforced by what we put out in December, and I'd like just to unpack a little bit for you what that action plan means. So the principles of open and inclusive and citizen-centered government were adopted by all the governments of Europe in Malmö under the last Swedish presidency of the Council. The digital agenda said in May of last year, let's do something about it. And we now have all the member states and the Parliament endorsing a specific action plan to push faster towards the tools of e-government. This is not the harmonization of local public service by people in Brussels. This is the creation of least cost available tools for use and the removal of cross-border inconsistencies which might hamper the use of those tools. So there are some aspects which are immediately replicable at any level of government, like empowering citizens and business, and efficiency and effectiveness, where we can learn more from each other to do it better. There are research agenda items in cross-border services, and as I said, I'll come back to that. And we need common approaches wherever possible to issues such as interoperability and open specification. So it's a familiar agenda, but I think that having got now support for pushing that agenda in all aspects of public service, it's an opportunity to review where we are in whichever place we are, whether it's a local county, a hospital, a tax administration, and see whether there are aspects that we're not yet delivering on. So this is a broader scoreboard which shows how we are pursuing in each country involved a benchmarking of our progress. And some of this, as you can see, is about the preconditions like broadband, and some of it is about open government. So this is the sort of stuff you can get if you go on our scoreboard. And now, if I come to the challenges for Norway, what would I say here? This is the bit where I am the most hesitant. I was asked to speak to it, but I see myself here as offering a few thoughts as a traveller, and travellers can be wrong. Let me start by saying, on the top left-hand corner of the conference slide, you have Diffie as a partner. And I would, just to explain why I am so diffident, Diffie has coordinated across Europe the large-scale pilot project on e-procurement. So if we know anything anywhere in Europe about how to do e-procurement today, it's thanks to work that's been led out of Norway. And it's thanks to work that's being led in part by people in this room. So I think that it may be that God has smiled on us, so Norway may just be fortunate, but you definitely have a special and leading situation in this field. And if I stay with this example of e-procurement, it is for me one of the biggest untapped sources of cost effectiveness in the whole public service agenda. My colleagues in Scotland have saved millions of pounds, and so also millions of euros, in their costs by e-procurement. The Swedes have cut the costs enormously. There's a huge evidence base out there that says that putting your procurement online enables new offer to come up, above all from smaller, more local business, and enables the cost of procuring to be reduced and the price of what is procured to be reduced. So here we have the emergence of an evidence base. We have a successful large-scale pilot project, but most of us are still not quite doing it. So I think that in a country such as this and in a conference such as this, where you are well placed to play a leading role, I think that that would just be one example where I would ask the question, should we be ambitious to be excellent? And I was saying yesterday over dinner to those I'd been working with in Oslo yesterday, modesty is a lack of public service. I didn't quite say it like that, but I think if you've got something great, it's very important to share it, and not only to share it in one country, but to push it around a bit. So that would be, I would say, one of the challenges. So coming out of a conference like this, it's not just more research needed, it's also advocacy needed. If I look more concretely, there are some things we're trying to advocate as the European Commission, which I think are relevant also in Norway. We have proposed in the Digital Agenda for Europe that digital research spending needs to double. Now, part of that can come from the private sector, but part of it has to come from the public sector. Part of it will come from the EU budget, but I don't think I will be getting twice the money under Horizon 2020 than I have today. Probably I will get more. So is there money for research spending? And it can come from anywhere. It can come from universities, it can come from your savings at the county level, it can come from the investment in organizational change in the hospital sector, it could come from capital funds in one or other public institution. Secondly, and I think here again, public sector information, it's part of the Digital Agenda for Europe, it's part of the agenda in Norway. I mentioned the Commission's scoreboard as an example, and in the autumn we're coming out with a big proposal on public sector information pointed towards the member states. Can you help by leading the way there? Can we find examples where cross-sector, cross-country government services are beginning to be delivered? And when I say that, I mean in terms of an ICT challenge, can we devote the sufficient upstream effort to saying, let's have the same data set that will enable people like, for example, social services, consultant surgeons in hospitals, and quality managers in national health services only to get one piece of data once. Strangely, we do recognize that business should only ever give us one piece of data once, but we don't recognize that same need for each other. So I think that's another ambition that I think we could all have, and since I'm here in Nokios, I would say that can be a Norwegian challenge as well. And finally, I've already said it, but don't forget the rest of the continent. I think here I say in a rather Brussels way, keep Europe on the agenda. I think Europe is a big thing. It has very unclear borders. Some people in Brussels, and I might be one of them, say that Europe is a state of mind. And in the ICT public service area, my sense is that we're in the same state of mind, but we need to go on talking and working together. So I would leave my remarks there. I think I've probably been shorter than I was meant to be, which is rather my wont. If there are questions or comments or suggestions, I would be very pleased to hear them now. But I would also repeat my genuine invitation. Every individual, every organization can be part of the future cooperation. I leave these challenges on the board as I conclude, because I think these are issues where even the digital agenda we wrote last year is deficient. We don't say enough about the challenges of internet governance, including how do we deal with the use of internet during riots. That was the British problem in the last few months. How do we deal with the tension between the use of internet as a breach of our state security and the use of internet as a breach of oppression in other societies? I don't think we're moving fast enough on IPR. That's not specifically a public service thing, but it can be relevant in public service. We don't really have an information society ethics, and we haven't yet filtered out what is hype and what is important in the cloud computing agenda. So what you see when you read our digital agenda and scoreboard is not everything. There is more. We may be missing things even in that list, but we definitely want to add to this cloud. And you'll see this is the digital agenda for Europe. So when we wrote it, it says a lot about EU, Europe, European, but it also says services, citizens, openness, innovation. And I think that if those are words you're relating to, then we can continue this conversation after this meeting. Thank you very much.
Then I guess we have plenty of time for questions to Robert. I've also read obviously the digital agenda for Europe with great interest. And as a professor at the university, I was very it's very positive, I think, as for doubling the ICT research. Norway is also working on a kind of version of the digital agenda. I guess many of those sitting in the audience here today. So maybe I should ask some of them, actually, as for how probable is it that we will see an increase in spending on ICT research in Norway like we see it in EU? Because as you say, even if the times now are troubling, we know that there are certain things we need to do on a longer term and preparing for a longer term. Okay?
But if I can comment on that, I mean, I think that we, even by talking about doubling of ICT research, we slightly get back in the silo. And one of the challenges I see is to redefine what is ICT research. One of the presentations I had yesterday talked about inductive research, and what that really meant was being slightly closer to market, finding solutions to problems that are out there in the public sector or the for-profit sector, and then learning from that and applying that knowledge to reach higher level hypotheses. We don't usually count that as research, but I think that the whole spirit of Horizon 2020 will be to be a more open research agenda, at least for part of the funding, and to have a more open approach, especially to SMEs getting into innovation and deployment as much as into very high-level research. So I think interdisciplinarity and moving a little bit the boundaries of what we think of as ICT research will be part of crowding in sources of funding and sources of support for the ICT public sector agenda.
Yeah, sure, because also, I mean, this greater emphasis on innovation should also inspire, in a sense, also researchers to do more research on the borderline, if you like, as long as there's some possibilities or still for basic research that you do more innovation-oriented research. Yeah.
It's early in the conference. People are keeping their bright ideas for a later presentation.
Yeah, I think, no, but it's interesting to see. Well, we had this meeting earlier this year relating to this EU benchmark, the Capgemini, and in the last benchmark, it seems that Norway is kind of slipping. It seemed a bit down, and well, it might be that it's because we are not have really the, maybe if we say we have the ambition to be excellent, but we don't have it. It's not so pressing, whereas other countries have larger needs to reduce public spending, use ICT more efficiently. But as you say, we are also doing well. If you looked on the numbers you had there, it seemed that compared to EU average, we are quite high on many of the metrics, if you like. So I think it's a very, very good challenge to the audience here, because there's a lot of, okay, we know that there's a lot of challenges also in Norway for how we do use ICT in public sector, and a lot of things that we've tried to do but haven't made enabled. But there's also a lot of good examples which we, as I understand you, should be better in bringing also outside Norway. So have that as a goal, and maybe kind of at an early stage, rather than after working with some solutions for 10 years and then, well, maybe some other people might be interested in this, and look upon some of the large initiatives in a kind of European setting rather than just a national setting from the start.
Yeah, and I think also that there are resilient problems around planning for the next generation's education, for example, or connectivity for the print disabled or for those who are lacking knowledge of local languages. There are all sorts of challenges like that where, however sophisticated a society, we all have those pockets of problems and we can learn together. And I've been very struck that in this field, ICT for public services, the learning is not going to be limited to one continent. You're seeing already today transfers from European ICT learning to health solutions in Africa, solutions from South Asian health tools coming into US deployment. I don't think we'll ever in the past we were moderately globalized. I don't think in the future we'll ever do justice to the knowledge revolution if we're only looking at ourselves or our society. We have to really look with very open minds further abroad.
Okay, a question, Tore.
Tore Jørgensen at NTNU. I had the pleasure of attending a conference also last week. It was on integrated operations in the upstream oil and gas industry. They had the same agenda as you are describing for the e-government.
Good.
But they also used a different word very frequently. It was capability. We have a knowledge level to be exploited, but we don't have the capacity to exploit it. That was their challenge. I have a feeling that we have the same challenge in the e-government. Mm-hmm. So is it really needed to have more research? Or is it needed to integrate the research with the education of the unemployed young people in Europe that really need to create their own future by taking and creating their future with the new technologies? So my saying is, why don't we address the more strategic agenda of building research into the educational system in Europe? It is too many companies that live from European research money.
Well, on the last sentence, I could not possibly comment. And I mean, as I said at the beginning, I don't come out of a research background. I manage a part of the EU research budget today. But if you look at what Mary Gagan-Quinn as the research commissioner is pushing for, I would say she shares your perception, because she came into office 18 months ago and said research has to solve the problems society has identified. Now, that's not quite the same as saying throw away the research money and put it in education, but the fact that she wants to move more into innovation, into a challenge-driven logic, means that we will, over the next 10 years, be moving closer to real problems. And the one example where we're working at the moment is active and healthy aging. The solution there was not to create a new research platform, but to bring together partners who were so far not relating to EU research in that field at all. We've done a lot of work about how to help older people live better at home where they choose to, instead of waiting until they have a fall or fall ill and then putting them in an institution. We have the tools, as you say. The rolling out has been poor because the social security and the health sector, the regional and the national sector have not been grouped together in the right way. So we are trying to find new ways to pull the research product down to the market. On education reform itself, I think at the university level, and again, the director was saying something about his own involvement in this, we are beginning to have an honest European debate. But politicians can't tell universities how to reform. And Brussels can't tell local education authorities how to change their schooling, even for a member state of the European Union. So some of this is politically very delicate, but I think that with the new Treaty of Lisbon and in the last couple of years, there is the beginning of that debate. But as always, it's a little bit slow for the urgency with which society expects us to fix the problem. So if that were the message also by the end of the conference, that would help us.
Okay. One question there, yeah.
It's a question on Twitter.
I have it here, so I can take that if that's was the a lot of helpers, you know, kind of crowdsourcing here. What is EU doing to adapt the laws for public usage of cloud computing.
Public usage of?
Cloud computing.
So I see very few obstacles to public usage of cloud computing, if I understand the question correctly. The idea that there should be public clouds, that's not a problem. The idea that government should have private clouds, that's not a problem. Data protection issues cross-border are a challenge, but that's true for the cloud and it's true for other aspects as well. Concretely, what we're doing is trying, both with our American partners and across the different involved groups in Europe, the data protection agencies, ourselves, local government, to find a solution to the problem of jurisdiction. Because I think if we can find a solution to the problem of jurisdiction, at least those who are writing cloud contracts will know where they're going. And at the moment, they don't know where they're going. So you have a global cloud technology with economies of scale at global level. But in practice, all the offers are territorially limited. And that's not a European problem. In Arkansas, they want their data kept in Arkansas. So it's not like the rest of the world is cloud ready and we're not. But we're trying to get ready quicker.
As I understand, also some of the providers could say, okay, this will be stored somewhere in Europe. And in Europe you have the same laws generally as for privacy. So that kind of makes it simpler.
They can say that, but then that's like saying here you have a Maserati, but you can only go at 50 kilometers an hour. Now, of course, that's what the police say, but that's why I don't own a Maserati.
Okay.
You framed in your speech through riots and terror and these events we had. I think for many of us, at least for me, I think it's relevant for many of us. That's only in the very, very far periphery of our attention, because that's police business, intelligence business. There are professional and institutional barriers. Are you saying this should not be so?
No. What I was saying is that I think if it's about people, people have only one life and they have one set of problems. And I learned when I was doing health in the past that being in good health is a continuum. And the continuum includes things like the anthrax attacks that the US saw just around the time of the Twin Towers. And it includes managing global pandemics like bird flu. And it includes the fact that polio has just spread back to China. So it'll come here soon. I mean, it includes everything. And you can't say, I'm going to divide up food safety in my country and we'll deal with that, and then polio, we'll leave that to the World Health Organization. In the same way, security and trust, it starts with whether I have a password protection on my wireless modem at home, and it goes all the way up to the hacking attacks we read about in the newspapers. So I think that government and society cannot truly be resilient if we build walls between the problems. That's not to say that when there's a war, it's not the army's problem, but we'll do better at the extreme end of threats, whether it's health or security, if we're also ready at the apparently innocuous day-to-day level. And frankly, as a society in Europe, I was surprised how unready we were when I began doing health in 2004 and we were thinking about bird flu. And when I raised that issue, people said, well, let's not get too ready too publicly because it'll worry people. But we were right to do more. And last year when I moved across to ICT, I had a strange feeling of déjà vu, because I think that around ICT, internet security and resilience, whether it's in public sector or private, we are somewhere in the same world, walking on ice and not wanting to admit it.
Okay. Yeah. Lars?
Yeah. I'm Lars van Marion from the Ministry of Reform and Government Administration. You mentioned several times the need for cross-border services in Europe, and the Commission has also facilitated such services through some large-scale pilots like Peppol, Stork, Spox. And my question is: are there other areas where the Commission will extend into with such large-scale pilots?
So we're trying now to move beyond pilots because we have a sort of market of pilots in many areas. So the large-scale pilots was a first attempt to do that. What we can then see is, okay, that's bigger, you get better proof of concept, but you still have leaders and laggards among the member states, and member states who are not volunteering to be in that process are actually not learning. So the problem we have is that the threshold cost for participation, which may be a monetary cost and may be a political cost or a lack of capacity, is an obstacle to realizing seamless cross-border improvement of services through ICT. In order to deal with that problem, what we're proposing is what we call a Connecting Europe facility, which is going to be funded starting from 2014, but we're legislating for it this autumn. And we're proposing to the Council and Parliament to put 40 billion euros on the table, 10 billion of that for ICT, and of that 10, let's say 70% for broadband infrastructure support, and the 30%, so this is the part that answers your question, to provide European hubbing. So that the next time we do, let's say, an e-procurement pilot, we will be able to say the cost to a member state to participate will only be in country. We will provide the software, the central hardware, and its maintenance without a project lifetime deadline, and all you have to do is choose to plug into it and run that software on your current system. Now, of course, it's not going to be quite as easy as that, but we hope that that will radically reduce the cost of participation. At the other extreme, someday you have to have legislated, standardized interoperability. In some areas where we've decided that interoperability is mission critical for the public sector, there is legislation in the EU, for example, veterinary reporting, which says you do it this way. If I come back to my health example, we have set up across Europe the early warning and response system, which is a secure EU-wide point-to-point connection for health security, including pandemics and so on. We need to judge carefully when we need to have that sort of hard standardization. And in the area of e-health, the decision now to adopt a directive on cross-border care and to set up the so-called Article 14 committee, which will look at standards in areas such as electronic patient records, is just one example of that. So I think that's a long answer, but in brief, we're doing two things: reducing the cost of participation and getting ready to make the standards where you actually need a hard standard to get interoperability.
Okay. I have a question here from Ingrid Melve, but I'm not really sure what it is. So Ingrid, are you here? There. Would you like to ask it and give her the mic? You have to run a bit.
So we see that ICT is a queuing mechanism.
It's a question about cloud computing. You mentioned cloud services as one of the 4 major challenges ahead of us.
Yeah.
And the current acceptable use policy, the stuff you click OK to, is currently either incomprehensible or totally unacceptable. Try reading the stuff from iTunes, even though they try to summarize the recent changes in 3 or 4 pages. There's somewhere between 57 and 61 pages that a standard student has to read through in order to update stuff on his computer. Is this something the EU is planning to fix on some of this?
Right. So are we planning to fix it? The honest answer is no. And if the answer were yes, I think you should be very worried. But the answer is no, we're not planning to fix it. But what is actually happening? I was reading on the flight up from Oslo this morning the reporting that's come out of the Norwegian Data Protection Commissioner on the case of Facebook, where they've dug very deep into precisely this question, and they're digging even deeper, I think it's fair to say, in cooperation with the company in question. This is, in my view, a consumer protection issue, in the sense that we're trying to assess as a society what degree of vulnerability do we have to information overload that will lead us to make bad choices about managing our data? And where do we put mechanisms in place, either by nudging the corporate operators or by putting in laws to save individuals from these suboptimal defaults? But it's very contextual. It takes a lot of research by a very competent authority in this country on one operator to get a few steps down that road. And I think it's fair to say that in between Facebook and the Norwegian authorities, they haven't yet decided what the answer should be. What we can do at European level is, and again, this is, maybe it sounds too much like sociology and not enough like political science, we don't make a law about it, we create a European space. So the Norwegian expertise will save everybody else replicating that costly exercise with Facebook. And even if you are a data protection authority in a country where you have been given less adequate powers, less adequate resources, and you don't feel quite so strong, that will transform the ability of different voices to nudge the market in the right direction. But if I think about what I have to read when I sign off on my house insurance, which I did last week, that's awful as well. So we live in a world of information overload, and the privacy case online is just one case, but it is a crucial one for making trust and security happen. So that's one that we're focusing on today. But we're never going to quite fix that problem.
Okay, last question.
Is it working? Yes. My name is Svein Erik Wiltjel. I had the pleasure of discussing an issue with you earlier this year at CMR in Brussels. And the issue is about how to involve local authorities, regional authorities, and of course all the central government institutions in delivering good services to citizens. We have in Norway about 400 and something central government institutions. We have about the same number of municipalities, about 19 counties, and that's a big challenge. How do you get all these actors to pull together? And also the question is, how does the Commission involve local authorities and regions in the realization of the digital agenda and the implementation of the action plan? And what would be your advice to central government when it comes to involving the whole public sector?
Yeah. So if I start at the end, in a way, this visit to Norway is part of the answer. In other words, we believe, me and my management board in Brussels, that we have to go and find what's really going on. So this is the first of 30 similar visits that we're making in different countries, and in some of them we have got specific focus groups in specific municipalities to try to feed better data and better perceptions up as to what needs to be done. So that's a sort of evidence gathering part. We don't do enough of that, and the problem is that there are too few people at the center and the reality is too varied outside. So that's the challenge. It's a classic ICT data management challenge, and so an important part of the solution ought to be to create the Facebook community for ICT change leaders at regional level. We're not doing that yet, so that's one part of the research agenda, or of the action agenda. The other level is to use the institutions that exist. So national governments, when they come to Brussels, claim with more or less reason to speak also for their local authorities. So in country, you need more open and participative government between the layers. At EU level, we have institutions like the Committee of Regions, and they can play a useful role. But fundamentally, of all those layers, I think the most exciting one is building a new community which can extend across countries and is involved not just in the research projects like PEPL, but also in sharing real-time experiences. What we will find, I think, increasingly, and this I'm not talking next year, but over a decade, let's say, I believe that society itself will become much more aware about what's going on in other countries, and we will, wherever we are sitting and working, be benchmarked against other citizens' experience elsewhere. So if the service providers at the local level don't get together to benchmark themselves and improve, we shall be pushed into it over the coming decade by dissatisfied citizens, which will be a less comfortable experience, not unknown to public servants.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to leave you with a gift. This is from one of my colleagues. He is an associate professor in the Faculty of Arts. And thank you very much for the interactive session with good questions and good answers.
Thank you.
Greit. Da skal jeg bare ta et par ting sånn rent som praktisk. Vi er nå i slutten av åpningsplenum. Sekretariatet finner dere på det røde bygget der, røde rommet, hvis det er noe som er problem, noe man trenger hjelp til. Utenfor der er også en informasjonstavle hvor blant annet disse Twitter-feedene går. Hashtag Nokios. Jeg ble bedt om, hvis det var noe som hadde internasjonal interesse, så skulle det også være hashtag DAELocalNO. Så siden vi bør også bidra til hva som skjer i Europa, så skjønner jeg, så kan man tenke på Twittere der også. Her er vi nå, plenumsalen. Etterpå deles det opp i 3. Trondheimssalen 1 og 2, her bak, og Møllenberg. Det er ikke så langt bort som det ser ut. Når det er utstillingsseminarer, brukes de rommene, pluss et par-3 andre, som er bortover langs gangen der. Og når det er lunsj, så må man opp trappa og rundt og til høyre. Utstillerne er på samme plan, alle sammen, bort utenfor her og bortover gangen et stykke. Og det er jo en konkurranse, hvor vi deler ut premien i avslutningsplenum. Der tror jeg det er informasjon om den konkurransen i deltakermaterialet dere har fått. Ok, da er det kaffepause. Fortsatt god konferanse.
of sin.